Hello guys, welcome back to the channel for a new Databricks video. Today's video would be about dynamic Databricks workflows. There are two ways to create dynamic workflows and jobs in Databricks. The first one is by utilizing the user interface in the Databricks workspace, and the second one is by using custom code and the dbutils command. In this tutorial we are going to see both ways, and as you can imagine, in both ways we are going to use a for loop. In the UI version, the for loop resembles a lot the data factories for each loop. It's a little bit more limited than that, but still you can do pretty much everything. So, let's get down to business. Okay guys, here in our Databricks workspace I have 5 notebooks. The first notebook that we want to check is this one, employees_data. And here, this notebook contains employee data. So we have an array, and inside an array we have 3 records. For each record we have an ID, a name, and email addresses. Now, if you notice carefully, in the email attribute we have an array as well, which contains multiple emails. So Alice has 3 emails, Bob has 3 emails, and Charlie has 3 emails. And here we are using dbutils.jobs.taskvalues.set. We pass employees as a key and value, and in the value we pass this array here that contains the employee data. So you are going to see in a little bit why we are using dbutils.jobs.taskvalues.set, and we pass employees as key. Here you can provide whatever name you want as a key name, it doesn't really matter, but the value is this array that we created here. Now the first task would be actually to iterate through the records here and print the name, like Alice, Bob, and Charlie, right? So if we go back and see the notebook that we are going to use, it's this one, first level name. And here we are using dbutils.widget.get, and we get the name attribute that we are going to pass from our workflow here, and we are going to print the name, right? So let's go to workflows, and now let's create a simple for loop. So let's create a job here, give it a second to load, and what we are going to do is actually fetch the data from this notebook. We are going to point to the notebook with the data, right, and fetch the data. So get_data would be the first task, and what we want is actually to point to this data here, and from this data we are going to fetch this array that contains the employee data. So then we create the task here, and now we are going to use a for loop, right, and that would be the next task. So click on add task, scroll down to the for each, and here, as you can see, first you need to provide the task name, and let's say simple loop, or just loop. Yeah, pretty simple, right? And then we have for each as a type, and then in the inputs what we are going to use is this one. So click on this brackets where it says insert dynamic value reference, and here by default it will give you tasks.getData.values my value, which is not my value, it's not correct. The correct is employees, right? Employees, which is which is the task that we set in the dbutils.job.taskvalues.set, and here, as you can see, the key is employee. So we refer to this key here. That would be the output of the first task, right? So the first here we fetch the data from the first task. Then here in the inputs we just going to iterate from the output of the first task, which is this one, task.get_data.values.employees, which refers to this key here, right? So let's actually concurrency, let's keep it, let's use 3, right? So we want to run all these records concurrently, print them concurrently, right? So let's click on add a task to loop over, and here then we can select the notebook I just showed you, first level name, so confirm this. And what we are going to do here actually is pass a parameter. The parameter would be, click on add, and here would be name, right? And the value would be actually input dot name, because the input alone would give you the whole record, all this record here, but what we want is this name attribute, so we use input dot name. Let's create the task. Let's rename that to I don't know, like test, right? Click on that, and let's actually run this. Here, as you can see, we fetch the data. The first task is to fetch the data from the employees_data notebook, and here we have the loop here. For each of these records, run concurrently all these 3 records, because we have 3, but we can have more concurrent jobs, tasks to run. And here we are looping over, and we pass the input dot name as a parameter, and this is going to print. Remember, as we said, let's go back to our notebook here. First level name, you can see in the notebook, we are going to fetch this attribute, the widgets.getName, and then print the name, which would be, you know, like Alice, Bob, and Charlie. So let's run this and see what we get. If you run, it's going to take a little bit because it will have to spin up the cluster. So I will come back in a little bit. So the workflow just ran. As you can see here, the first task is to fetch the data, and then here, as you can see, it's a loop, right? So if you click on the loop here, it opens the new tab. You will see that 3 jobs run, 3 tasks run actually simultaneously, concurrently, because we set the concurrency to 3, as you can see here, right? And the inputs are all those things. And here you can also see the attributes ID, name, and email. Now, if you click on that here, open these tabs, you will see each task that has been that run individually. So we expect to see the name. The first one is Alice, right? Or something, because it's concurrent, so you don't know which one will be first. Alice, as you can see here. Yep, and then the second one is Bob, etc., etc. The third one would be, what was the third name? I don't remember. Charlie, right? Okay, so here is a very simple loop that you can loop through an array, a JSON array, and print the names. It was the first level inside an array, right? Because that's name. But here, let's say that you have an email that has an array as well, and you want to loop through these email addresses, right? And print each individual email address. And it would be actually 3 email addresses for each name. That would be Alice would have 3 email addresses, Bob 3 email addresses, and Charlie 3 email addresses. So in total, we should print 9 email addresses. So this time, what we want to do is actually create the bottom layer workflow. So let's create the job. Let's call this job bottom layer, right? And here bottom. Actually, let's select the type as for each. You will see why. Here, let's call it bottom layer loop. And here we have job parameters, so click on edit parameters, continue without saving, and here just use emails, right, in plural. Click on save. You don't have to provide a value. And here, this is a job parameter, right? So here, now that we select for each, let's retype that, and we have bottom layer loop. In the for each, we click on the reference, we use the job.parameters.emails, concurrency 3 because we have 3 email addresses. You can have more, but we have only 3 email addresses per person, so we don't need more concurrency here. And then click on add the task to loop over. And here inside the iteration, we can actually point to this last level email address, which is exactly the same. So let's go here, see what this notebook is about. Last level email address. And here you can see we get a bottom underscore layer underscore email attribute from that is passed from this workflow here, and we print this email. So we should run this notebook 9 times, 3 per person, right? So, but here, as you can see, we get we pass this parameter from the workflow. So copy that here, go into your workflow. So here use the cluster that you have already is already up and running. And here in the parameters, one would be emails that will be pushed down, you cannot change the values, and one would be bottom layer email, which would be the input, right? Because from here, so this is the bottom layer, right? And here in this loop, we iterate through the records and we get the emails, through all the emails, each per person, right? And inside here, this input here would be each individual email address. So this is the bottom layer. Now let's configure the top layer. Let's create another job here called top layer. And then here it should be, the first one should be the get fetch data, right? We point to the notebook, to the first notebook that contains the data. So click on here, right? And then use the cluster that you want and then create a task. So first fetch the data from the notebook, then add a for loop. So let's create a for loop here. And then here again, so let's say top layer for each loop, and here we pass the employees again. Employees, come on, yep. Concurrency is 3 because we have 3 employees, so they can run concurrently. Fetch the data, okay, and then we can add a task to loop over, and here instead of a notebook, we are going to point to the job that we just created, which is called bottom layer. And here, you see emails, we have as a key, in the job parameters, we have emails. And here we are going to actually use the input, right? Input dot actually emails, because we want to pass the emails, actually email, because it's, let's see again the original data, because I don't remember. We have to check the data. Here you can see it's email, the attribute it is email, so input dot email. So we loop over this list of employees, and then inside each iteration we pass the input dot email attribute. So here dot email, and then we create task. So we create this task, right? Save and continue. And as you can see, the only difference here, the main difference here, let me zoom out. The main difference here is that instead of pointing inside the loop, instead of pointing to the notebook, which is the last layer, we point to a job and we run this job simultaneously. Or you can run it you know, like sequentially, just use one if you want, but let's say that we want to use it to do it concurrently, so just use 3 in this example. Now let's run this example and see what we get. Again, it has to spin up the cluster, so give it some minutes. As you can see, we fetched the data, and now here the top layer iteration is running. So if we open that, we need to see 3 iterations, and inside those iterations we want to see, let's see, we should expect, yeah, another 3 iterations. So if we open that, we should get Alice, the first email, so the second email, that would be the second email of Alice, the third email of Alice, and if we go back into runs here, then we have Bob and Charlie. So for each user, we are going to print 9 email addresses, right? So we have 9 outputs. We run the same notebook 9 times. So this is how you can use dynamic workflows and pass parameters and do, unnest this array that you have to provide in the initial data here. The problem is but this is how it works. So when you want to loop over something, you need to provide an array. So if you pass something else, it's going to give you an error. You need to provide an array so it has something to loop over. So we achieved to perform this dynamic workflows thing using the UI. So here under workflows now, we check that how it is to create a simple for loop. Here under tasks, if we can see again, we fetch the data and then we use a loop here, and for each element that from the JSON array that we provided, then we loop over and do our thing. And here in the second example, we use 2 for loops here, one inside the other, and instead of the notebook, here we run a job that runs a notebook. So if you have nested data, you can do it like that. But this is the UI version. Now, if we go back to our Databricks notebooks here, I have the custom version that we can achieve the same thing a little bit differently. It's not exactly the same, but we achieved the same results using custom code, and we can do that for concurrency. We can use thread pool executor to run concurrent jobs using threads here, right? And here we define the same data, and here we use here we got for each of the employee. For each email of the employee, we have this tuple here that we have the name and the email address. And here we have also defined a job function called submit notebook. We pass the email and we use dbutils.notebook.run, and here we point to the email processor, which is actually, let's see again the data, which is this notebook here, which doesn't do anything, but it gets the email and prints the email address. So we are going to do the same as before that we did utilizing the UI. We are going to do that with custom code. So we point to this notebook here, and then we pass the email as an argument, and this is what we are going to fetch here, right, and print it. And so using with thread pool executor, maximum work is 9 to run, because we have to run 9 concurrent jobs. For name email in email jobs, this is the list that we have, which has tuples with the name and the email addresses, and then we submit and we provide the function name and the email as a parameter. Now if I run this, what is going to happen, as you can see at the bottom, first we are going to print this list of tuples with the name Alice and the first email address, Alice with the second email address, Alice with the third email address, and it runs concurrently 9 jobs, 9 notebooks, and the run parameters, as you can see first, it passes each email address separately, and it runs 9 notebooks which will print those email addresses. And this is how you can achieve the same result in using custom code instead of using the workflows. This is it for today, guys. We just demonstrated 2 ways to achieve the same thing, 2 ways to achieve dynamic workflows and dynamic jobs. One is using the user interface, the workflows, and build dynamic workflows, and the other one is achieving the same result using custom code and the dputils command to run the jobs separately and concurrently, of course. Now you can play around, check which way is better for you, which way is better suited for your own needs, which way is more convenient for you and your team. If you like the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you, guys.